Hey everybody, this is Sheila Ryan and I am with Shannon Fabrics. I'm a Cuddle ambassador and I'm so excited to be bringing you this project today. Today for Sew Together Live, we are going to be making a trick or treat bag from Cuddle, Luxe Cuddle, Digital Cuddle or printed Cuddle fabrics, and I think you're really going to love this project. This time of year, kids are getting excited about the trick-or-treating and Halloween upcoming holiday. And so what better project to do than to use Cuddle Fabrics to make something that can add a little comfort, add a little love, and an extra bit of cuteness to your holiday season. So I'd like to first remind everybody as you're watching Sew Together Live today to please share this video to your social medias wherever you're watching. So share it to your Facebook. You can share the link from the YouTube to your social media. But we love to see who's here. Please let us know where you're watching from. That's always fun to see everybody in the comments. Thank you for saying hello and thank you for being with us. So having said all that, let me tell you what the prizes are. We are going to have prizes and prizes are fun. Today, we're going to have 3 winners, and what you're going to win is a 2-yard Cuddle cut of fabric so that you will have some fabric to use, whether you choose to make a one of these cute tote bags or you want to make another Cuddle project. You're also going to get a $20 gift code to my website, which is designsbybabymoon.com, because I've created some really cute embroidery design files that I'll be showing you to add an extra bit of cuteness to your tote bag. So a lot of people wonder, can you do machine embroidery on Cuddle fabrics? And I want to tell you, you absolutely can. I'm going to be sharing some tips for doing machine embroidery with Cuddle. We'll be talking about the stabilizer and about setting it up in your hoop in just a minute. But I have lots of inside kind of secrets to share with you. I'm not holding anything back. Please let me know if you have a question in the comments about the process and we'll make sure to answer that. If you are not a machine embroiderer, this project is still for you because you can still make an adorable tote with the pattern that we've got on the Shannon Fabrics blog, and we'll have a link for that. But so whether you want to add machine embroidery to your project or you're not going to, anybody can do this project with your sewing machine. So having said all that, let me show you what we're making. So I have this adorable tote bag right here. This one says, "Hey Boo," and I've used some of the glitter Sparkle Cuddle. This Sparkle Cuddle is one of my absolute favorite Cuddles. And today the lights are being great and they are sparkling the Cuddle for me. This looks like something that would not feel as good as it actually does because the lights are catching so much of the sparkle on it. But I want to assure you that it is as soft as any other Cuddle fabric that you have. And it's just wonderful. I used it in this one as the applique area and then also for the straps just to give it extra sparkle. We're going to be stitching on regular C3 Cuddle in a minute, and that is a smooth Cuddle, and we'll be lining it also with Cuddle. But the tote bag instructions that are posted on the Shannon Fabrics blog suggest that you can also use Silky Satin, which is another Shannon Fabrics product, on the inside of your tote, or you could use it on the outside if you'd like, but then you have a nice silky lining for the inside. When we're thinking about a tote bag, what I'd like you to go ahead and think about is how you want it to feel at the end. So some of us, when we're sewing, we just start sewing and we don't really know how it's going to come up at the end. But for this project, I'd like us to spend a few minutes just thinking about how we want it to end up. I'm thinking of trick-or-treat bags. I want this bag to be sturdy so that it can last at least through the evening of my kids running around the neighborhood, literally running up and down sidewalks as it gets dark, knocking on doors, going to different people's houses, gathering candy. And some of our neighbors are really generous with the full-size candy bars, so they have come home in the past with quite heavy sacks. Nobody wants a trick-or-treat sack that has busted apart before they've gotten home with their loot. So I want a sturdy bag. I want a bag that's going to last, and I'd like a bag for them to use next year and the year after, or anytime they want to carry something cuddly and fun around. So I've chosen to use Cuddle fabrics with this because it is a sturdy fabric. It is a stable knit fabric, so it has a little bit of stretch, not a whole lot. We're going to control that stretch in the sewing process, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. But I don't want you to be afraid of this because it's actually a very easy project. The pattern says that you're going to need two 16 by 16 inch pieces for both the lining as well as the outer fabric. And you can make this tote with two 16 by 16 inch pieces of the same fabric or different fabric. Some of my samples, I've used a regular cotton quilting fabric. So this one's just pink and orange polka dots on the inside because it went well with the lava. Let's see, this is the Luxe Cuddle Galaxy Lava texture print of Luxe Cuddle on here on this one. We're going to be using the C3 Mandarin for the ones that I'll be stitching out. And so there's just no end to the kinds of color combinations that you can use. On the blog post, I've given a list of some of the other examples that I've stitched out. The one behind me right here, I have hanging on the wall. I did some embroidery on it, but then I used the piece of embroidery as a pocket on the front instead of making the tote with the finished embroidery. And that one has the super cute digital cuddle print called Oh My Gourd. And it's just so fun. We're going to be using that one in a minute for the lining of the tote that we'll be creating together. But on this one, I used it on the outside and then put the owl pocket on the outside. So I can use that as a pretty functional tote for lots of things. And it's going to last a very long time because it's made out of cuddle and it's so nice to sew. So this project's got those two pieces for the front and back of the outside, the front and back of the lining, and then we'll need two pieces of Cuddle or Luxe Cuddle for the handles. And the measurements for those are 3.5 inches by 26 inches. So if you get two different coordinating cuts of Cuddle fabric, a half a yard of each, you'll have enough fabric to make this tote and a little bit extra. If you're somebody that makes strip quilts and you get lots of different cuddles to put in those places of the strip quilts and you end up with a half a yard left, this is a great project for using those half yard pieces. And so I love combining pieces of Cuddle. There is no end to the color combinations that you can use. If you watch the Cuddle showcases with Julie and Diana on the first Tuesday of the month, you'll see that they bring in all different colors and textures of Cuddle fabrics and mix and match them and just bring all the different ways that they combine with other Cuddles in the Cuddle lines. And that's just so fun. It's very inspiring to me. So I had a hard time narrowing down the Cuddle that I was going to use for the project because we have so many options. This smaller tote that I did, it's actually the same size, but I boxed the corners on the bottom. And when I did that, it made the tote a lot shorter than the 16 by 16 inch ones. And it's not actually smaller in volume. I just boxed the bottoms and that took out height. So I have about a 2.5 inch boxed bottom. And so it made it about 2.5 inches shorter all the way around. But I used the Gory Ghouls print for this one. And this is really fun. It's a little creepy, but it's still pretty cute. And you have that wonderful Cuddle texture experience in it. Okay. I want to get to sewing. So let's talk about machine embroidery and Cuddle. And machine embroidery is my love. I love it. And I love doing it on Cuddle because I get an effect that is so textural and it's very different from doing machine embroidery on any other material. When we do machine embroidery on Cuddle fabric, we get almost a quilted kind of texture. We get peaks and valleys and we get dimension because of the nap of the fabric. That's the pile that sticks up, the fibers that stick up on the Cuddle fabric. Cuddle Minky is the C3 is 3 millimeters long. So those little fibers at the top are this. And when we stitch between the fibers, that's when we get the texture that I love. And it really is so wonderful. So I want to show you how I do that. Now, I've got my embroidery machine already set up with the embroidery design that we're going to be using. That design is called Hey Boo. It's over on my website, designsbybabymoon.com. You may choose to use a design like that, or you may choose to put something else on it if you do machine embroidery. You may choose to just add a name or a simple initial alphabet letter as a single monogram, and that would be a great way to differentiate the totes for your kids or your grandkids or whoever you're gifting these to for trick-or-treat time. But in your embroidery machine design file, that file probably comes with a couple of PDFs. And so if you've not looked into all of the pieces that come in your machine embroidery files, let me encourage you to just take a minute, and when you get a machine embroidery file, open it up on your computer and see what kinds of files are in there. There's going to be the files for your embroidery machine in the format that you need, but there also may be a couple of other documents. In my files, for these applique files that we're highlighting here today, there are 2 PDF documents in each of the embroidery files for the sizes, the different sizes of the embroidery file. And so let me tell you about those different files. So the first file that will be in there as a PDF will be a step-by-step tutorial. So this is the Hey Boo applique tutorial. I just printed it off. You do not need to print it off if you would like to save a tree, but I printed it off so I had it right here with me. It's going to take you through the materials that I suggest you use. These are just guides. This is not the only way to do it. If you'd like to substitute any of these materials, you're welcome to. It's just how I did it. And so if you want to do it just like me, this is what I used. And then it'll also have the step-by-step instructions, and it'll tell you when to put your applique material down and when to trim around your applique and when you're going to do the finishing step on the applique. So look for a PDF tutorial in your applique design file. Not all applique designs need a tutorial, but some designers put those in just as a kind of a guide, a helpful guide, so you know what's coming up. The other document that's in probably in your embroidery design file set, mine got stuck to something, is a PDF color map. And the color map is it's got 2 specific purposes. So the first thing it does is it tells you when the colors are going to change on the embroidery file. So it's a step-by-step. Now we're going to put the white thread in. Now we're going to put the blue thread in. Now we're going to put the gray thread in. And it'll take you through the colors. When we're doing applique on Cuddle, we're not necessarily always seeing the thread colors. If you look at the owl behind me here, I did the owl all in white thread. So even though I have different colors of the applique I've got the purple, the orange, the yellow, and the dark purple for his eyes, I used white thread. The thread color is not going to show up so much as the texture that the stitching gives the Cuddle fabric. So I'm not worried about it. And the one that we're going to do in a minute, I'll just tell you one that's already done. We're going to use all black thread for the whole thing. So we're going to use black thread for the hey. We're using black thread for all the parts of the lettering just to make it easy. And so I don't really have to worry about changing the threads, but my machine is going to stop after the design tells it to change the color. We don't need to change the color. I'm going to use black thread the whole way through. It just tells the machine to stop so that we can work on it. Whether the work on it means putting the fabric down, trimming the fabric, or moving to another step in the process. So let's go over to my embroidery machine real quick. What we're going to do is we're going to look at how my embroidery machine stitches out and what happens on the Cuddle fabric. I'm going to show you how I hoop Cuddle fabric. I don't actually hoop it, so that's the first part. That's kind of a surprise. We're going to float it, and I'll show you how to do that. And then after we get done with the embroidery, we're going to go over to my sewing machine so I can show you how to put the tote together. If you're not a machine embroiderer, I hope this at least gives you some information on how to do machine embroidery so that when you get an embroidery machine, you'll know what you can do with it, right? Okay, I do want to spread the joy of embroidering on Cuddle fabric, because I think that's something that people are afraid of, or they think that they can't do. And so it's absolutely possible. So let's do it together. I'm going to switch. Let's see. I have Adriana actually helping me. So Adriana is going to help me switch over to the embroidery machine so that we can look at that together. Okay, so over here at my embroidery machine, I'm over here off to the side just to, so the camera is not weird. What I've got is my hoop that's the appropriate size for the design file. So your embroidery file comes with different sizes, and depending on the size hoops that you have available for your embroidery machine, you may decide to select a certain file size. I've got a 6x10 file size on here, and that's not actually going to fit in this hoop, but I do want to show you how to use this kind of hoop on your embroidery machine. So these are the hoops that my machine came with, and so this is the 8x8 size. How my machine came with the hoops was with these little grids, and I rarely use these except when I'm lining up things on a piece of pre-cut fabric. So because this Cuddle tote bag had the instructions to cut the 16-inch by 16-inch square pieces, I know that I want to get the placement correct on the embroidery machine. So I'm going to use this grid on mine. My hoop actually has a very small L and R, and my template plastic that came with the hoop has an L and an R, so I know that I've got my hoop in correctly and I've got this little grid in correctly. This little grid matches up to these little markings on my hoop inside the edges of my hoop. Let me get it just right there. And it falls onto those little guides. And then it gives me a grid so that I can find the exact center of my stabilizer. Now I could just take a pen or a Sharpie and kind of give it a dot right there on the stabilizer just to mark it for me. The other thing that I can do to make sure that that's the center is I could go ahead and put it on the machine and go ahead and slide it onto the connector part of the machine, and I can lower my needle and it will go right into the center of that grid just to kind of show where it's going to start. So I know that that is centered. My design's going to be right there, and so I can take my color map piece of paper that looks like it went away from me, but I could put it on here as a template to help me sort out exactly where I wanted the embroidery to go. So that's how I would get this one ready to go. So I know that my embroidery is going to stitch in the right area. And then to get my embroidery lined up exactly the right way, I would simply take my piece of Cuddle fabric. This is my pre-cut piece. And on the back, I've already marked the top of the fabric so that I know which way the nap is going, because I'm going to put this face down. So I want to make sure that I know which way the nap's going. In my machine, this design is oriented so that I need to put the top of my fabric over here, and it's going to write out BOO and then hey right here at the top. So I need to make sure that my nap is going down this way, which is why I've written on the back. And I did all of this when I cut it. I did this on the back of the lining as well as the outer fabric, so that when I get to the point of sewing it together, it takes some of that guesswork away. The other thing that I've done for my stabilizer is I have already sprayed it with a little bit of 505 spray. I love using 505 spray because it makes embroidery a little bit more stable, and it helps me to control it, because I don't necessarily want to put this material in between the hoops. So I don't want to crush the pile of the fabric and cause it to have any kind of creasing or anything that I'll have to work out later to undo. And so I put the 505 spray on the hoop. So now I can find the center of my fabric by folding it in half. And because I know already, because I used the grid, that this line here to here is halfway, I can decide if I want my embroidery design to be right in the middle of the piece that I'm kind of fussy placing my fabric, or do I want it to be a little bit higher on the fabric so it's more up at the top of the bag, and I think that's what I want. So I would move my piece of fabric up like that. And you can use your template. You can cut out the actual embroidery on the color map to help you do that. But that's the way that this little template really helps if you're using the hoops that came with your machine. Now, the other day, we had an event with Dime Designs and Machine Embroidery, and they have some wonderful hoops that I do really love using with Cuddle. And so what I've done over here is I've already got my fabric hooped in the hoop with my stabilizer and the Cuddle fabric, and I've actually got them secured in the hoop because this Dime hoop is not going to crush the fabric. It's not going to leave any weird markings or do anything that I really have to work very hard to get out of. Because I'm hooping my Cuddle, I didn't use 505 stabilizer on the back of the, I didn't use the 505 spray on the stabilizer. That's what I meant to say. So I've just hooped my Cuddle and the stabilizer together in the hoop. And then I can go ahead and put it on the machine. And I've already measured this, so I know that it's going to stitch. This is closer to the top of the piece of fabric so that it will be mostly in the center. And then I can snap that hoop on and I'm ready to stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and let this start stitching, and I'll tell you more about the stabilizer once we get started over here. So what the design is going to do first is stitch me a placement stitch so that I know where I can put the fabric that I'm going to use for the applique. So that's what's doing right now. And it takes a minute just to stitch each little piece out, and we'll keep talking while it's doing that. It's going to give me all of those outlines that I need. The stabilizer that I'm using is actually Silky Soft and Sheer stabilizer. I like using that stabilizer with Cuddle fabric because it makes the Cuddle stay soft. If we're thinking about the tote bag that we're making and how we want it to feel at the end, I want it to still feel soft and cuddly because it's Cuddle. I want my tote bag to be nice. I want it to be almost like a hug in a tote. You know, we're using Cuddle because it has that great textural effect, that tactile experience. And so I'm thinking about it like a stuffed animal. We don't want a rock hard stuffed animal. We don't want a stiff stuffed animal. We want it to be soft and cuddly. So I'm going to use a soft cutaway stabilizer. There's lots of different poly mesh type stabilizers. I'm making sure that the one that I'm using is polyester. It's not nylon, so it's not going to shrink if I ever need to wash this tote. That is something to keep in mind because not all poly mesh is created equal. Some poly meshes have a fusible on it, and that may be something that you want to consider as well. If you'd like to stabilize your outer fabric by fusing the cutaway stabilizer on it, then you might want to consider a fusible cutaway. Okay, we're almost done stitching the applique placement areas. And I've got a piece of, let's see, I'll show you over here. I've got a piece of black Cuddle that I'm going to use for my applique that I've already kind of cut roughly bigger than the applique areas that I'm going to use. And I'm simply going to place it on top of those outlines, making sure it's completely covering all those outlines that were just drawn. And I'm going to let my embroidery machine tack down that Cuddle applique material. So now I've got the stabilizer, I've got my tote bag front of the Cuddle fabric, and I've got this piece of applique Cuddle fabric. I saw a question about not using water solvay on the Cuddle. So because I'm doing machine embroidery applique, no, I'm not necessarily doing any solvay or topper material on top of my Cuddle right now. All I'm doing is the applique. So I'm appliquing Cuddle on Cuddle, and I don't really need any topper. Actually, I don't really want any topper right now because this is what's considered a raw edge applique, which means it's not a full satin stitched applique. And so you're going to see some of the edges of the fabric underneath the stitching. If I were to use a topper on this area, then what is going to happen is that some of that topper is going to remain underneath those stitches, and I'm going to be able to see it because this isn't a solid outline. So knowing what your embroidery design that you chooses, knowing what it does, you know, by looking at it either on your computer or by studying the example photos that you get when you buy a design is really helpful, because that can help you determine, do you need a topper or not? On this part of the design, we're not going to use a topper, but after we get the applique part done, we are going to use a topper for the part where it says hey at the top. Okay, that is the satin stitch, and we don't want that to sink in or disappear in the nap of the cuddle. So we'll put a topper down. I'm actually using a heat away because I like it better than the wash away. Wash away, I don't, it's not my favorite. I don't like using a wash away topper that I could possibly get wet. If it does accidentally get wet and I didn't want it to get wet, wash away topper kind of gets gluey, and that texture with Cuddle fabric, it's not my favorite. So I'll like using a heat away, and I don't heat it away. I simply peel it off, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay. So, see, Cindy asked, I don't have an embroidery machine. Can Cuddle be machine appliqued? Yes, absolutely. And it works as beautifully for machine embroidery as it does for regular sewing machine applique. So we'll have to put on the list of topics how to do regular sewing machine appliques soon for y'all for a Sew Together live event. But yes, you absolutely can use your regular sewing machine to machine embroidery or to machine sewing machine applique Cuddle. Okay, we're almost done with what's considered the tack down stitching. So all of the pieces of the Cuddle, those outlines have been run again, and that kind of tells me, it is really hard to see on black, isn't it? But it tells me where I'm going to trim out. The scissors that I'm going to use to trim applique on are my Kai double curved applique scissors. They swoop down so that I can get into the hoop if I was using one of the original hoops that has a taller side. Because I'm using this flat dime hoop, I'm simply going to go very close to the stitching and trim around the edges. And so because this is Cuddle fabric and because it's a knit fabric, I can pull on it just a little bit. I'm not yanking on it. I'm simply giving it a little bit of tension so that when I trim around these letters, I can get very close to the stitching. And it makes it super easy to do that with scissors that have a nice point to it. You might prefer the scissors that have a slightly rounded tip instead of a pointed tip. It's just whatever works best for you. I like the pointed tip, and I'll show you why right here. In the middle of these letters, I've got a part that I need to trim away. And so I'm using that tip, that pointy tip, to kind of lift up just the layer of black Cuddle. So I'm not going all the way down and stabbing through the orange. If I did that, I would cut out the center of the orange, and I don't want to do that. I just want to cut away the black so that I have an opening in that O. And I'm just really quickly going to snip around there. Sometimes we've got to do some gymnastics to kind of get in there with our applique scissors. You absolutely can remove the hoop from the machine if you need to. When I'm doing a Cuddle applique, I'm actually looking for designs that have larger areas to do with applique, because the Cuddle fabric is so it's so nice to use because of the vibrant colors and the beautiful prints. The prints are larger scale though than your traditional quilting cottons. And so because of that, any applique material that I'm going to choose, I don't want the print to get lost in the details. So I'm going to use an applique design that has larger applique areas. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're choosing both the fabric and the designs that you want to use for Cuddle applique. All of the colors in the Cuddle line for the smooth C3 Cuddle are so vibrant, and I love I tend to collect colors, and to me these are as important for applique as the actual thread colors are for a regular, machine embroidery is all about the thread, right? But for Cuddle embroidery applique, having all of those colors in my arsenal is like having a wonderful collection of paints to use. So I just tend to collect, you know, at least a yard or two of colors as I can, just so I have them. And sometimes one of the first things that I'll do if I know that I don't want to run out of a particular color is I'll cut a 10-inch strip off of that color and put it with my applique stuff so that I can applique with it. Okay, so I have a little bit of cuddle dust right here. You can see over here. Oh, and I need to cut out the centers of these bees. So let's get in there and let's trim that away. So because I'm using these super pointy scissors, I can get in there really quickly and just trim that away. Now my cuddle fabric is secure, so the tack down stitch is what we call a double stitch. So it is secured the cuddle to the fabric. Once cuddle does the initial fray here, you can see all these little pieces that I've generated because I just trimmed with scissors. All of this little fuzz is not going to keep fuzzing. So as an applique, this is fine as it is because it's already tacked down, it's already secured to the fabric. And once I clean this up, whether I'm using a shop, you know, a little hang on a minute, I'm getting the audio back. I'm sorry about that. We're stitching down the finishing stitch, and we'll bring the audio back in just a second. Hang on. Okay, let's see if you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Okay, so we've got the, sorry about that. We are, I didn't expect that, but it wouldn't be a normal day if we didn't have a, something happened with the sound, right? Okay. Okay, so this stitch right now, what it's doing is it's just finishing this applique. And this is just a zigzag stitch that is not a solid satin stitch. This is a kind of an open zigzag. A solid satin stitch would take quite a while to stitch out. My machine is telling me that I've only got 9 minutes of stitching left for the whole embroidery design. And so we're not going to do the whole 9 minutes. What we're going to do is I'm going to let you see how this finishes these applique letters. I'm going to show you how I continue to finish them up. And then I'll show you how we set up the hay part with the water soluble stabilizer. But we're not going to watch the whole thing because that can be quite a while. So let's just give this 1 second. While this is stitching, I'm going to make sure that we've got everything ready for the next part. And I've got a little piece of water soluble. No, not water soluble. This is the heat away topper. It's hard to see because it's clear, right? Okay, so it's a clear film, much like water soluble topper. This does not remove with water though. This is removed with heat, and I don't even use heat to remove it. I'll show you what I use to remove it. I just peel it away. Let's see. Oh, my thread broke too. Well, okay, let's double check everything and tell it we're good to go. Okay, We're almost done with the applique area, actually. So any other pieces, because this is raw edge applique, because it's raw edge applique, if you didn't do a great job of trimming because you were trying to work in there under the hoop, it's okay, because we have an opportunity after it's all done to get there. I'm simply advancing so that we can get this part stitched out and it lets us keep going, which is what I want. Okay, let's see if that'll let us keep going. And what's the head on your machine called? This, Helen, let me see. I'm trying to think of what you might be asking. This machine, this is a Janome 550E. This is my single needle machine, and it's a really wonderful machine, and it accommodates a really large hoop, which is why I love it. The hoop size that I'm using right now, this is a dime snap hoop monster. This is the 8x12 size. The embroidery file is only 6x10, so I don't need this big of a hoop, but I only have a small dime snap hoop monster and then this large one. So I could have used the regular 6x10 hoop that comes with the machine, but I just used a larger one. And honestly, I like working in a larger hoop than I actually need to anyway, because it gives me more room to work at in there. Okay, we're almost done doing the zigzag stitching around the insides of the letters. So this is just, just some quick little zigzags just to hold them down and give them a little bit of texture. You can kind of see here, where you can see some of those zigzags. The nice thing about Cuddle, it's so forgiving though, that even if I had used a different color of thread, if I rumple my fingers through the pile, I really can't see the zigzags. I can see some of the texture that the zigzag makes, but I can't see the actual stitch color. So when I say, it doesn't really matter what thread color you use right there, it doesn't really matter because you can't see it. You can just see the effect of it. Okay, the next step for the machine embroidery is the part where it's going to say hey at the front. This is a time when it is good to refer to the color map. I did find mine, it had fallen on the floor. And so it shows us, here was the first stitch that was the outline, the tack down, and then the zigzag for the letters. And then this one is where we're going to write the word hey. Okay, we're going to stitch the word hey. So grammatically, we would say hey boo first, right? So we would write hey, then we would write boo if we were writing it. The embroidery machine is doing different things than being grammatically correct. And so we're trying to stitch in an order that's logical. We're doing this part last because this takes the most time to do that applique. So let's get that out of the way first, and then let's stitch the hey. So I can see about how much room hey takes up on the design file, right? When I put this on my, here, this is my template from the first page of the color map. And so I'm going to cover that area with this clear filmy, trying to make the light hit it so you can see it, with that heat away topper. And we're going to run the letters. And you can see how this heat away topper helps the stitching, instead of sinking down into the stabilizer like it did for the applique areas, it's going to sit on top of the pile. This topper helps it. It's telling me that we are not threaded properly. So let's fix that before we go on. Okay, let's rethread. So now I don't, if your topper is wiggly, if you have a fan, or if you have, if you're in an area where the wind is blowing, you might want to secure your topper down with a little bit of embroidery safe tape. So I like using just a little bit to hold it down. I don't use any, our bobbin thread is not catching right here. So I'm going to stop that before we go further. And I'm going to tell it to cut that top thread, and let's find out why the bobbin's not catching. But I'm stuck under here. There we go. I'm not going to use any 505 spray to keep my topper in place because it's sitting on top of the Cuddle fabric, and I don't want it to get, I don't want it to touch that way. Does that make sense? So I'm only going to put a little bit of tape to hold it down to the hoop or to the fabric, well out of the stitching area. If I'm going to use any tape at all, I'm certainly not going to stitch through it. So that is something that I don't like to do at all. There are Teflon needles. This machine is pretty picky with its needles, and so I don't want to do anything that makes my machine mad. And so I'm going to, give my machine the best opportunity to get the job done in the way that I want it. And I'm just backing it up a little bit so it can actually do the stitching for the hay. Let's see. Oh, we're almost there. And like I said, we're not going to stitch through the whole thing here because I already have another one stitched out and ready to go. And we'll get to sewing. Okay, so we're just getting those 2 stitches. There we go. All right, let's start stitching. And as you may know, if you already do machine embroidery, you see these threads here. There's always threads to clean up when you're doing machine embroidery. Some people worry about these threads, and we've got to clean them up anyway, even if your machine cuts all the tails and there's handwork to do on the end of it. So it's really not a push the button magical process and then bam, this happens. There's a lot of handwork that actually needs to happen for machine embroidery. Let's see. Helen says I had problems getting the right foot for the Janome. These are 2 size shanks. Expensive lesson. You know what? You're right. So some machines have a high shank and a low shank, and getting the right foot for the shank to match with the foot, that's a whole process. You're right. That can be a thing. Let's see. So I have, and this is an embroidery only machine. So I've got the standard embroidery foot on that the machine came with, and I haven't done anything different to reset this machine. If your machine is a combination sewing and embroidery machine, then you do need to take some care that you're putting the right foot on for the right process that you want to be doing. Okay. You can see how great that stitching looks. I hope you can. I almost got my finger too close. But it's really, the topper helps that stitching sit up high instead of sinking into the pile of the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and show you on this one that I've already stitched the exact same thing. I've got the topper right here, and this is how it's going to be all the way at the end. And this is how I take the topper off. I simply peel off the side. It's almost like I'm rolling it off sideways. I'm not pulling straight up. The reason I'm not pulling straight up vertically off is because I don't want to disturb these stitches. They're beautiful. They're perfect. The machine did a great job, and I want them to stay perfect. So I'm not going to disturb the stitches. I'm going to pull the topper off sideways to get them out of the way. And then I can use the tip of my, trimming scissors, or I can use tweezers, or I can even use my stiletto tool to get any bits that are inside any letters or any little pieces that were left. And now is a great time because it's out of the hoop. It's done being trimmed. I can trim off any loose threads, but I can also go back in to these applique areas and really make sure that I got everything off that I wanted. So I can go in and open up these letters a little bit so that, they look a little bit cleaner. Any place where I'm not real happy with it, I can just give it a little bit of extra attention. And again, I can use these curved applique scissors to do that. But because I can fold and manipulate the fabric, I can get really close to the stitching lines. And I could probably even use regular scissors if I wanted to. And then after this is all done, there's one more thread right there. And this is the one that we're going to be doing the tote bag out of. I'm just making sure that all, there's no stitches where I don't want them to be. So those were stitches between the letters. And I'm just trimming those away. And then I'm going to brush any pieces of Cuddle off so that this is ready to go. I have one jump stitch right there. Let's trim that away. Now, the other thing about machine embroidery that sometimes people worry about is the back side. Well, because our tote bag is going to be lined, this is what our back side looks like, but we don't really have to worry about this because we've got a full lining, and I'm going to go ahead and remove most of this cutaway stabilizer. And the way I do that is this had some 505 on it, so it's a little bit stuck to my Cuddle fabric. I'm simply going to, unpeel it a little bit from the embroidery. I'm not pulling very hard on it. I do not want to yank those stitches at all. I just want to make it so that the back of the embroidery is hanging away from the stabilizer. And then I'm going to simply cut roughly around the embroidery so that I don't have all of the stabilizer in my project. Sometimes if you have too much stabilizer in there, it just looks weird. And I'm thinking about the way I want my embroidery to feel at the end, the project to feel at the end. I don't want it to be stiff, and I don't want this embroidered area to be extra stiff because of extra stabilizer. So I'm simply letting the fabric fall away, and I'm trimming around to cut the stabilizer away. Okay. And you can get as close as you need to, but please don't snip your stitching. So this is the same way I do it, whether I'm embroidering on a garment or something like a tote bag. I just let the fabric, the main fabric, fall away, and I only trim the stabilizer. And there I am. So I can throw that away. Here is the back. So you can see I didn't trim everything. I didn't go in there and I didn't get crazy. I just trimmed the bulk of it away, and that keeps the fabric with a nice soft hand. So it feels just as good as if it was just a piece of Cuddle. Okay, that's why I trimmed that stabilizer away. Okay, let's see. Oh, thank y'all for sharing. Don't forget to share. And I'm just a reminder that when you share, that enters you in a chance to win. We're going to have 3 prizes, a Cuddle Cut, as well as a gift card for embroidery designs from the Designs by Baby Moon website. So lots of good reasons to share. Okay, let's see. If you haven't tried embroidery yet, Alice, I hope you get brave and give it a try. So our embroidery right here is just about finished. You can see all my Cuddle dust. I could take care of that with my lint roller or my shop vac, but I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine. I've lifted up my presser foot, and I'm going to do it one more time just so you can see how I peel away the topper. I'm simply going to peel. Okay. So I'm peeling it away from the embroidery. I just kind of rolled it off. I've got these little bits here. You can get them with your fingernails. You can get them with your scissors. You can get them with your stiletto. That's a great way to use your stiletto. It doesn't take much at all to remove that. This heat away topper is actually going to stay underneath these letters. So even when you launder your tote bag, if it's wash away, the wash away would wash away, and your letters, your stitching could shrink in or sink in. With heat away topper, it's not ever going to do that because it's going to stay in there because we didn't take it out. We left it in there and we just pulled away the extra. Okay, so this one would need to be cleaned up before I can get to sew it. Since we've already cleaned up this one, what we're going to do is we're going to move over to my sewing machine, and we're going to look at how to sew this tote bag together. So Adriana is going to move a file for us so that you can take a screenshot of all of the parts. This is, all this information is on the Shannon Fabrics blog, but you'll be able to see all of the things that you need for making this project yourself. So it's just just a reminder, take a screenshot. All of the links for the different kinds of Cuddle that we're using are available on there. And you can see all of the fabrics, the names of the fabrics that we've used in these, as well as the materials that you'll need to stitch this up just right. Okay, let's see. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to come over to my sewing machine after you've gotten a screenshot. Let me give you a minute just to get a screenshot, and we're going to talk about the rest of the pieces that we need to make an actual tote bag. And I'm going to show you a couple of other options as well for embroidery. So we're over here at my sewing machine. Let's back this up a little bit. And for the technical difficulties, I'm going to have to scoot this back a little bit. We did a lot of work with camera setup earlier, and then that kind of didn't work out, but we're going to do what we've got. So this is another option for machine embroidery. This is another applique design. So it's a super simple applique, too cute to spook. I've got the heat away topper, and let me just show you. Just roll it off. And then I could simply pick out the heat away topper from in between those letters. And then, knowing what the embroidery design does and how it comes out is something that you want to consider. Not all embroidery designs work equally well on Cuddle, so think about what you've got available to you. This embroidery design is a little Frankenstein applique face, and he's super cute. I've used Cuddle for the neck bolts as well as his hair, but I used glitter HTV for his face. And I know we don't necessarily think of glitter HTV going with Cuddle. This is an iron-on product usually used by people that have those cutting machines like a Cricut or a Silhouette or the Juliet cutters. I like using it with the Cuddle though because it had a really interesting textural thing that happened. And let me tell you about it so that you're not surprised if you decide to try it. So because the Cuddle fabric has a nap, and it's got some volume to the fibers on the front. When I put the HTV on, the HTV was kind of floating over the surface until it was tacked down. HTV has an adhesive backing, and it's meant so you don't have to put an edge on it like you do with a fabric because it's not going to fray. It's just a thing. And you iron it from the back or you use a heat press to get the HTV to stick to the fabric. Well, because of the volume of the nap in the fabric, what happened is this HTV kind of got a little rumply texture, and it may be kind of hard to see on camera, but it looks like little wrinkles on this project though, because this is, Frankenstein's monster and he's kind of a monster. It's okay that he has wrinkles in there. So I was a little surprised by that. But now knowing what I know about HTV and the way it reacts with the Cuddle, I would not hesitate to use this again as an applique material. Of course, Cuddle is always great on Cuddle. No problems there. Nothing wrong with the texture of that. But the HTV did react a little bit different. So I thought I'd point it out. I did use white Cuddle C3 for the eyes. And then this part is actually just embroidery thread stitching. Again, I used black for the whole thing. I did not change my colors at all. So this is another one. This one's not done because I wanted to show you a different way to do the handles in a minute. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take our front piece and our back piece of fabric, and we're going to get these ready to stitch together. So in the materials list, you've got a front piece and a back piece. We want to make sure that we know which way the naps are going. And we do that by, running our hands across the Cuddle. If we're going the wrong way, we get this weird zebra effect. It's kind of like petting a cat backwards. And so when we rub the opposite direction, it smooths it out. If you go side to side, like selvage edge across the width of the fabric, you don't have that rumpliness. It only happens down the length of the fabric. So I know that this is the top and this is the bottom. So on my back of the fabric, I've already written a little T with an arrow going down to remind myself the nap's going down, and this is the top of my fabric. I did that on both the embroidered part before I started the embroidery, as well as the other side of the outside of the bag. And now I'm going to take and I'm going to pin these together so that I can stitch a bag, right? That's what we're making. We're making a tote bag. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the double pinning that we all know and love, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently because I'm making a smaller tote bag project. If I was making a large blanket, I would do this a little bit differently, but because I'm making a small tote bag, I'm going to do something just a little bit different. So embroidery can change the dimensions of your square. So I've actually got a little bit larger piece for my embroidered area than I intended to use for this one. So you can see when I flip this around that my embroidered piece is a little bit larger. So now I'm going to take care of that, and I'm going to make sure that these are now the same size. If you're not doing any embroidery on it, then you can skip this step and you can go right to two pieces that are exactly the same size. And then this is how we would do our lining. But on this one, I might need to trim up just to make sure that these pieces all line. And we're going to assume that I've already done that, okay, just for time's sake. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to match my edges. So I'm going from the top to the bottom, and I want my pieces, because they're the same size, to match. And I'm going to give a pin at the top and at the bottom of my square on the left and right sides. And I'm going to pin at the top, the bottom, and the middle. Then I'm going to do my double pinning. So I'm going to be sewing this way. So my machine's it's going to be going into my machine this way. So when I'm pinning, I'm going to be putting a pin. This is my first line of pins. And then I'm going to be doing the double pinning that we all know and love. I'm going to put a second line of pins up the side. This is a little awkward because of the angle that I'm at, but I don't want to be in the way and I want you to be able to see well. And I'm going to do the same thing in this section down here. Now I've got these two sections of pins because what happens when you're sewing Cuddle fabrics is sometimes your front and back can work against each other and they try to push each other out of the way. When we put all these pins in here, we're controlling the fabric. So we're in charge of the fabric, and that way the fabric doesn't get away from us and it doesn't do something that we don't want it to do. So I've got this line of double pins. I've got these markings here from me so that I know that if I was sewing along this line and all of a sudden I've got a bubble or too much of the top fabric down here, I have a chance to correct that before I get down to the bottom and I have a lot of fabric that I'm trying to ease into it. So this just these are kind of like markers for me. They are not functional pieces of pins to control the fabric. They're just for me so that I don't have to ease so much in case I didn't pin well enough and I've got things out of skew. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the other side as well. So if this was a luxe throw, when we think about sewing a luxe throw, we're going to sew across the top, down each side, and then from the outside corners of the bottom in and meet in the middle. For this little tote bag, we don't have to do it like that. We're leaving the top open, but I'm going to sew down one side. Then I'm going to flip my bag over and I'm going to sew down this side. I'm going to go in the same direction for sewing my tote bag so that nothing gets skewed. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to pin it the same way I pinned the other side. Since the whole tote is not, it's not so big that it's going to be draping over the table or in my lap, I can give it these pins and I don't have to worry about, them poking me. If your project is hanging off the table and getting near your body at all and you don't want all those pins, then you could certainly do just one side at a time. But I'm going to, just put those pins in there for now. And I'm going to go ahead and sew this side, flip it, and then sew this way. We're going to do this on the outside of the tote as well as the lining. And then we're going to do the handles. So the way I've got my machine set up is I've got a long, let's get this to a straight stitch. I've got a long straight stitch that's about 3.5 millimeters long. So it may be a little hard to see that on this camera, but I've got my walking foot on. And one thing to know about your sewing machine, this is just a matter of getting to know your particular machine. You may be able to adjust the tension of the presser height of the presser foot so that the presser foot pressure can affect the way your Cuddle sews. So if you can adjust the presser foot pressure on mine, it's this little arrow with the presser foot pressing down. I have this all the way up to 0 on this. This is a Janome 6700. So it has that feature where it lets me adjust the pressure. That means that my presser foot isn't pushing on the top of the fabric and squishing it away from itself. The walking foot is going to help control the fabric so that the bottom fabric is not getting away from the top fabric too much. They're naturally going to try to get away from each other. We've got lots of pins in here to help stop that from happening. And then I've also got the walking foot because I am giving myself all of the opportunity to keep it under control here. Okay, so I don't need that first pin right now. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out. I've got a line on my machine that tells me I've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I also know that on my particular machine, where that 1/2 inch seam allowance is right at the outside edge under inside that walking foot. So I use that as a visual to watch while I'm stitching. I don't watch the needle as it's going into the fabric. So that's just a tip if you're a new sewer. When you watch the needle, you may not get the straightest stitch, but if you'll watch where the edge of your fabric is, you'll get a more consistent seam allowance as you sew. So let's go ahead and sew down the lines of this side of the outside of the tote bag. I'm going to give it a little back stitch. And again, with the walking foot, you don't want to go full speed ahead. So if you need to, you can adjust your machine so it's not going the fastest that it can go. This isn't a race, so you don't have to worry about, you know, winning. It's the beginning of October, so you have time, plenty of time to make lots of trick-or-treat bags. And as I'm going down this line, I'm removing the pins before I get to them, so I'm not in danger of running over them. I know from experience that hitting a pin with the sewing machine needle is not a great event, and so I don't want to do that again. For pins, I'm using the long clover flower head pins. These are the ones that come in the box, not the ones on the card in the envelope. The ones in the box are stronger. They're a stronger, thicker pin. And I'm just going to add some more to the back side so that I'm in control of this fabric. So I sewed down one side from the top down. Now I'm going to flip it over and sew down the other side from the top down. And remember, I told you that these pieces weren't exactly the same. So I have to give myself a little room because that's about a 1/2 inch in. So the embroidery, I cut the embroidery piece a little bit bigger. So I'm going to line up my edge with that mark. And that tells me that my other side is right there. If you need to trim it off with a ruler, you totally can do that. We're just going to go down this side. And again, I'm not going as fast as I can. I'm just going as fast as I need to without the machine getting away from me. Okay, I don't know if you can tell this, but I want to show this right here. So you can see that the machine is pushing some of the fabric out, and I have a little bubble here. And so because I put that pin there, that bubble stops with this pin. And I'm going to kind of give the machine, the fabric, the opportunity to correct itself, give it a little bit of tension from the back side so that I can get that bubble out. So now that bubble's gone and I can keep stitching. And that means that when I get down here, I don't have a big bubble of fabric that I have to ease in awkwardly. So I'm simply going to continue down this line and sew all the way down till I get to the bottom. And I'm going to back stitch just a little bit at the bottom and then cut my thread. Okay, now we're done sewing down both sides. We can take the rest of the pins out. And now I can sew across the bottom of my tote bag. Okay, now the bottom, see again, the embroidered piece is a little bit larger. The bottom already has the two pieces, these two lines here. So I don't need to put a pin here and here. I do want to put a pin in the center so I can control any ease of the fabric. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is when you cut the fabric, the stretch of the Cuddle fabric is across the width of the fabric. So this is quite a bit stretchy. This lengthwise down the fabric is not stretchy at all. So what I'm going to do is if there's any difference between the front and back of the fabric, I'm going to ease it in my double pinning so that it's kind of distributed evenly down the fabric as I'm sewing across. Okay, so if you've got any differences or irregularities, you can use that stretch to your advantage right here. So I'm going to do the double pinning and just give all the pins that I need to right here. And that way I am in charge of the fabric. Don't let the fabric be the boss of you. You're in charge. Okay. And now I'm going to go from one side to the other. I'm thinking of this piece with my 1/2 inch seam allowance and not this piece that's too big on the back. And I'm just going to go across, back stitching at the corner again. Oops, let's see, that was a little too far off the fabric. I'm going to use this tip of my stiletto to help me guide that fabric through and give it, there it goes. It's better to use a tool like a stiletto instead of your fingers. Sewing doesn't have to be that dangerous. Okay, and that you can use a stiletto to help you see where the fabric is trying to curl because it has a natural stretch this way. It's totally fine to use your stiletto to help control it. Again, I'm not going to run over any pins. I'm going to be a responsible person and take them out before. This pin is still helping me control this area. And so because I've controlled everything else, I didn't end up with any extra to ease in on that side. Okay, now I'm going to cut my threads. And now at this side of the fabric, I'm going to cut these corners across. Now I'm not going to cut all the way to the corner. I'm simply going to give it a little trim right here. Okay. And then I'm going to give it a trim on this one. This was the one that kind of got eaten by the machine. And so I'm going to set some of that stitching free. So now it's a fine corner. It's a fine corner. And take the rest of these pins out. Be sure to take your pins out before you turn anything right side out. And this is our outer edge. I'm going to go in here with my fingers. You could use a Hera marker or a corner turner to poke your corners out, because we cut off a little bit of that bulk. Your corners should be nice and smooth. And there is the front of our tote bag. Okay, look at how these corners are. And this is something that happens when you're sewing with Cuddle fabric, is some of the fibers may get caught in the seams, and you can simply use your stiletto to pick those out. It's not a big deal. Once they're fluffed out, they're fluffed out. And so that's a fun activity. If you need to now, you could go ahead and trim. I see I have more threads to trim. And I'm going to trim those now before it's never too late, but you know, I want to get them out of the way now. And now we're going to do our lining the same way we did the exterior. Now my lining fabric, the pattern suggests that with your lining fabric that you apply some sort of stabilizing fabric to take out the stretch. I do this on the lining instead of on the outer fabric, because if you've done embroidery on it, you already have some stabilizer, and we don't want that to be too thick. I want to distribute the thickness or any bulk that we add to the fabric by having the lining carry the weight of any extra stabilizing. So I'm going to put my lining fabric right sides together, and I'm going to do the same kind of pinning that I did for the outside. So a pin on the top and bottom of each side, and then a pin in the middle. And I'm going to do the double pinning. Now, because there's no embroidery on these, that pin is a little bent. These pieces are exactly the same size, so I'm going to make sure my pins are just in there, keeping it nice and secure. I'm still double pinning though, because I don't want the fabric to push against itself on its way over here. Now your printed color, this is the Oh My Gourd. Usually the directional fabrics, when they're right side up, that's the way the nap's going. So I did I mark that on these? I did not mark it on these because I knew that. But if you have trouble telling which way the nap is going, you know, just pet it. Give it a little pet. See if that way feels like petting a cat backwards. We don't want that. We want it to be nice and smooth and flat. And so this would be the top. This one's directional. So when the letters and the little objects are the right way up, I know that's the top of the fabric up there. Okay, so I've got one side that I'm pinning. I'm going to go ahead and pin the other side so that I can flip it quickly and keep stitching, because we want the same way, even though we've got some interfacing on these pieces of the lining, which I've applied SF 101 onto this bag, and we'll talk about why in a minute. And there's not one particular right answer, so there's lots of different things you can use for that. But I put that on this bag, and it's already done. I just ironed it on there with a warm iron. It didn't take a lot to get it on there. That way, I was just ready to go when we got to that point here. Okay, so now I am ready to sew down this row. Okay, so I'm going to sew down each side, and then I'm going to do the same thing, then go across the bottom. So let's get everything in position, and let's start stitching. And again, I'm watching the side of the fabric where it's going in according to my seam guide, and I'm not watching my needle. That way I have a straighter seam for this area, and I'm letting my pins control the fabric. That's really important to me, and so I'm not taking out that second row of pins so that they keep the fabric together for me. Then I can just flip and do this side same way. And we've got one more step after this, and we're almost done with the super cute tote. Okay, I'm going to leave those in, and I'm just going to go all the way down. The fabric behaved well, and it did not bubble up right there because I was in control. I used all my pins, and had my pressure fit right and everything. Okay, now we're going to sew across the bottom, and I'm going to put a pin in the middle just to make sure I don't ease anything. I don't have to ease anything in weirdly. And then I'm going to give my double pinning again. Of course, you can use the Wonder Clips for this. And I think originally on the pattern that's what I said to use. I've done it a lot of different ways. I just prefer using pins. I'm not an expert at using clips, and pins to me just feel more secure. But if you're more comfortable with the clips and yours can be controlled that way, then by all means use the clips. I feel like I have more control with the pins, even though they are a little bit more dangerous. Okay, we're done with that line. And now I'm going to cut off the corners of this piece as well. So I'm not cutting all the way into that corner. I'm just cutting off some of the bulk. Okay, I think I have about 1/4 of an inch from the seam where they cross that I cut off still left on there, but that's going to get rid of some of that bulk in the corners. And that way, when I put the inside of the bag into the outside of the bag, I don't have so much in the corners. And so I'm simply going to slip the inside into the bag, and I didn't need to turn it right side out because it's the lining of the bag. And that's going to do a couple of things for me. It's going to give the bag some structure, which is nice because, this isn't just, this isn't a one-time use bag. This is a bag that they're going to have for a long time, and it's going to be something that they use over and over again, that will stand the test of time and all kinds of other activities that they want to do. I'm just making sure I get my tote bag lining all the way down in the bottom because I want these edges to match up. Okay, there we go. So now it's all the way in. I'm taking advantage of the stretch that I have with the outer fabric to kind of help the inner fabric and the outer fabric match up really well. Okay, so, you've got the opportunity to do that because we didn't put any stabilizing fabric on the outer fabric. I tried one version where I stabilized both the outer fabric and the lining fabric, and I felt like it was too much with the Cuddle. The Cuddle's already a nice thick fabric, and I didn't like the way it felt. It felt really bulky and thick, and I didn't like that feeling. So this feels nice and soft. I use the SF101 on the lining. Another option that you can use is regular regular fusible interfacing, the Pellon kind, for treating your lining fabric to give it some stiffness. I like the way the SF101 feels better than the other interfacing kind because this is a cotton fabric, and so it's like having a fused layer of cotton in it. And so when I squish it, it squishes nicely. When I put the other kind of interfacing in, I felt like it was too stiff, and it didn't crinkle audibly, but it felt crinkly to me, and I didn't like that. So that's why I've chosen to use the SF101 on this. You also could use fusible fleece interfacing. That will give it a lot of thickness and a little bit more heft if you'd like that look. You can use Deco Vial, which is it's like a product people use on the inside of making bags like purses. That will give it a nice structure that will be unlike anything you've ever done before. But there's no wrong answer there. Just if you choose not to put any stabilizer on the lining, your bag will be very soft and will actually feel more like a blanket than like a tote bag. So I want something in there to kind of give it some stiffness and some body, but still be soft. So I've got the fusible in there. Okay, we've got our bag. Now we need to make some straps. So I've got some straps that I've already made, and let me just show you how they come out. So these are the straps as they are finished. The pattern says to cut 2 26-inch long strips by 3.5 inches wide. And then we're going to use something on the inside of the straps to give them some body. You might want to use some nylon webbing. This is a piece of Soft and Stable, which is the By Any product, the foam interfacing that's used for bags making a lot. It makes a really nice handle. This is not the only, lining that you could use for your handles. You could also use plain felt or fusible fleece, but you only need 1 inch of it. So it is quite a bit thinner than the exterior fabric that we're going to use for the handles. So what you need to do is you can use this is actually a really good opportunity to use the 505 glue stick. If you haven't had a chance to try these glue sticks, these are really nice, especially because over here by the sewing machine, if I wanted to use the spray, I would need to move this over to an area that's safe to spray it. I don't want to spray anything close to my machine. But with the glue stick, I can work right here. And all I need to do is give the fabric a few little dots, okay, with the glue stick. And then I can let my fusible interface, or my interfacing, this isn't fusible, it's just regular. And it holds on really nicely. It gives me a little bit of control. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up one side of my fabric, and then I'm going to fold the other one on top of that. Now, when we were doing the embroidery, I told you that once the cut edge of the Cuddle fabric frays, it doesn't keep fraying, right? So this is a raw edge right here, and it's totally fine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm either going to use a wonder clip or a pin, and I'm going to put a pin in it. Okay, and I'm going to do this the whole way down. And I'm not going to worry about this raw edge, because what we're going to do with the straps is we're going to give it a zigzag edge. And I've already done it a little bit on the end of this, so I'll show you that. And because this is a tote bag, you could get really picky and professional, and you could fold this top edge under so that you didn't have a raw edge right there. But I'm going to tell you, on the handles, it doesn't really matter, because I've did it both ways and I couldn't really tell a difference. The little folded edge, if you fold it about 1/4 of an inch under and then pull it over to cover the top edge of that, it just gives it a little bit more thickness. And it doesn't actually change the structure or the function of the handles at all. So instead of working that hard, I'm simply going to lay my cut edge over the top of that. And what I've done over here is I've already started sewing. And so I just used a very wide zigzag. My zigzag is 4.5 millimeters wide. Okay. You can use a wider one if you'd like. You know, you're not limited by anything except the width of the zigzag that your machine will do. And then it's also a longer zigzag. So I'm going to set mine at 4.5 millimeters wide. Let's get that just right. And then I'm going to set it at 3.5 millimeters long, so that it's a 4.5 wide, 3.5 millimeters long. That's just what I like. It's not the one answer. You can do a 5 millimeter by 5 millimeter zigzag. This is, you know, try some different things and see what you like. But then once you've got the whole thing pinned, then you're ready to put it under your presser foot. Let's put a pin in here so that this doesn't get away from us. And then we'll simply zigzag the rest of this strap down. Okay. Now, you know, if you want to, the big wonder clips, the jumbo wonder clips are really great right here. But again, you know, I'm really comfortable with the pins, so I'm going to use the pins. And so see how I'm just zigzagging over this raw edge. The bottom one is tucked underneath. I should use my stiletto instead of my scissors. The bottom raw edge is tucked underneath that top edge, and I'm just zigzagging it down. Okay. And I'm letting my machine do the work. I'm not pulling very much at all. And I don't want to run over a pin, so I'm going to use my stiletto to help control it. And once this is zigzagged down, it's not going anywhere. So you know, go slow until you're comfortable doing what you need to do. And then once you're comfortable, by the time you get all the way done with the first strap, you're a pro. Okay, so the second strap will be easy peasy. Okay, and then that's all we have to do for our straps. Now, because I've gotten these other straps done, I'm not going to make you watch a zigzag but the whole way, but this is how the strap comes out on the other side. So it's just easy peasy. Now, we're almost done. So we're going to take our straps that are finished now. I made these from the same lining fabric, so you get some of the cuteness and the color from the print. And I'm going to take the top edge of both the lining and the outer tote and fold them in under 1/2 inch or so. There's not a wrong way to do this. Remember, this piece was larger, so I've got to kind of fudge the outside to get it to match up just right. Because the inside is stable, though, when I can kind of see, I've got a nice edge. So once I fold the inner one back up on itself, I have a good edge to match up the outer tote too. And I'm going to pin these on both of the seam allowances. I've got the seam allowances open on the insides of each area, and I'm going to put a pin right there so that my top edge is, they're right next to each other. And I'm going to make sure that that is the same at both edges. So let's fold that down. And now there's the top edge over there. I'm going to put a pin just on the other side of the seam allowance. These seam allowances are opened because I don't want to go through so much on either side. And so I have them open so that I'm only stitching across as few layers as I can. Okay, now I'm going to take my front piece and my inside piece, and right in the center of the front, I'm going to put a pin. Okay, and when your pieces match up, your front and back pieces, these and your seam allowances are all 1/2 inch, this will line up really nicely for you. I'm just going to pin all the way around, but I'm not going to sew yet. I need to insert my straps. The way we're going to insert our straps, we'll make sure that we have no raw edges and no loose places where cuddle dust is going to come flying out at us. It will be contained in the bag itself. I'm doing the same to the back. I'm just putting a pin to hold the front and back together. And, oops, I dropped a pin. Okay. I'm going to put one more over here. And then the way that we're going to insert these straps is we're going to do the same thing on both the front and the back, but I'm going to keep it laying down here so I can see. Now our straps have a right side and a wrong side. The wrong side was the part we folded over. If you get this mixed up though, it's not a big deal. I am going to make sure that both right sides of the strap, as it comes around, that it's not twisted or anything. And I'm going to tuck these straps in so that about 1 inch of it is inside the tote bag. And the way I'm going to do that is kind of about halfway between the middle and the edge, kind of where I put that pin. I'm going to take my pin out because it was holding the fabric together. I'm going to slip my strap right in there, and I'm going to replace the pin on one side of that strap and just hold it there with the pin. Okay, I want this to be as flat as possible. I don't want there to be any bubbles. And then on the same place over here on this side, I'm going to again put about 1 inch of the strap into between the lining and the outside of the tote bag and replace my pin. Okay, that might be a little bit thick, and if it's hard for you to put a pin in there, then that would be a good place to use a clip. But clip, the bigger clips are going to let you clip to the middle. The smaller clips, you may have to just clip at the edge, but it's going to stay in there just fine. And then whatever we did on the front, we want to do the exact same thing for the back. So I'm going to go ahead and pin my back strap in place as well. So in the same place, because my bag is flat right here, I can see that I can tuck my strap in just about 1 inch between the front and the back. And I'm going to grab another pin just for security and put it right here. I've kind of got it angling off there so it's catching both the strap and the tote. And then right here so that it lines up where the front one is, I'm going to slip it between the front and the back about 1 inch in. And right now I'm double checking that my straps are at the same length. And I can tell, you may be able to see what I did wrong. And let's fix that before I go any further. I had my strap on the wrong upside down. So I need to make sure that it's not twisted. So let's replace it. There we go. That's the right side of the strap facing the outside of the bag. That's what we want. We don't want it the other way around. Although, you're the only one that probably would notice that. I would notice it, and you would notice it, but people who don't sew wouldn't notice that at all. So my handles are the same length now, and I'm going to take and do a plain top stitch all around the edges of the bag. If your machine has a free arm, then this will be something you may be familiar with doing, like if you're hemming a pair of pants. So you're going to do it the same way you would do that. My machine doesn't have a free arm. Mine's built into a table. So I've got to do a little bit of rigmarole and do something a little bit different. So let me show you what I'm going to do. For this one, I'm going to sew from the inside of the bag doing my top stitch on the inside. My bobbin thread is the same thread as the top thread. I've got white in the bobbin. I'm running white on the top. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to actually see it on the cuddle, right? Because it's going to fall in. It's just going to give me texture. But what I am going to do is I'm going to make sure that those edges that we folded under, I'm catching those in my seam allowance. So it's a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch and a little bit less than 1/2 an inch because I know I turned it under 1/2 an inch. And I'm simply going to top stitch this from the inside. Oh, that's my zigzag. I'm going to top stitch this from the inside of the tote all the way around. Now I'm back stitching when I get started, and I've started in the middle between the two handles. It doesn't really matter where you start, but what you'll need to know is that you're going through quite a bit of thickness when you get to the handles and when you get to the side seams. And so if your machine struggles a little bit, you can help it by manually turning the hand wheel. I'm using a 9014 needle, which is what we use all the time with Cuddle fabrics. So this one works fine on my machine. But if you find that your machine is balking, and that is part of the consideration of what interfacing you choose to use, is how easy it is for your machine to sew through these layers. But if you find that your machine is balking, then just, give it a little bit of extra chance to work by, manually going over those harder places by turning the hand wheel on your own instead of using the machine power to do it. Mine's doing just fine here. When I get to the straps, if I remember, I'm going to give them a little bit of a back stitch just for extra security there. I'm taking my pin out so I don't sew over it. And I am just at halfway around the whole edge of the bag. You can see here's where I started. And so the bobbin thread on the front is not a big deal because you can't see it. And it's just, it's just white thread. A lot of times when I'm sewing Cuddle, I'm often using just white or gray. There is no reason to, unless it really, really matters and you know that your stitching is going to show, I don't get worried about what color my thread is when I'm sewing Cuddle fabric. Okay, I'm almost back around to the beginning. That's the last handle to go. No, I've got one more handle to go over. This is the last side seam I've got to go over. And I'm just making sure that everything's out of the way. And you can hear it when it has, it's not having a hard time, but it's like it could be having a hard time. You can hear that, the sound that your machine makes. And it's fine. It's not a big deal. And I'm just kind of going around here and give that a little bit of back stitch right there just so that handle is extra secure. Because I've tucked it in so far down into the bag, about 1 inch down in there, I'm not really worried about that handle coming out. But if you are worried about it, you certainly could make a little X to secure that handle on further. Okay, now I got back to the beginning where I started. I'm going to back stitch a little bit and then take my needle out. I've got a little thread here on the back, and then I've got a little thread here on the front. And this tote bag is done. Now, if you had a free arm and you went around and you were sewing from the right side of the fabric, you would be doing the same thing. We were sewing from the inside of the fabric. Another thing that you could do is, if you need to, you can bring your tote bag, and it depends on the size of your machine. If you were sewing from the inside of the fabric and you needed to, you could open your bag up and kind of have it inside the machine like this. Another way to sew it is to, if you wanted to sew it from the outside and you wanted complete control of that, you would kind of open it and flatten the bag out so that you would have it flat and you'd go all the way around like this. That takes a little bit more fussing with, but it's still perfectly fine. Again, the easiest way would be to sew it on a free arm. But again, if your machine is built into a table or doesn't have a free arm, that's how to accomplish that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, Adriana, do you mind putting the materials list up again? I'm going to move the camera angle so that I can talk to you guys and show you some more things. And if you'll, yeah, thank you for putting that list up there. So I'm going to flip this, and I think what I'd like to be able to do is see you guys. Okay, so I think that's right. And Adriana, I'm flying blind here because I can't see you or hear you, but I think I'm in the right place. Okay, so let me do one thing real quick. So that's how to make a tote. On this tote bag right here, this is the one we just did all the way through. Hold on a minute. Okay, let's see. Adriana, do you mind taking? Thank you. We're gonna do. It's okay. This one. Okay. We're gonna turn that off and get that out of the way. All done. Oh my goodness. Alarm. I'm so sorry. But what we've got is your completed tote. Perfect for trick-or-treating. Perfect for any kind. Fabric are really nice so that when you're carrying this around and you're feeling a little anxious, it's really nice to hang on to. Let me try one more thing. Okay. Is the sound back now? Okay, we've got sound back. Sorry about that. We did test all of this thoroughly the other day. So when you've got somebody that may be a little bit anxious, they're new at trick-or-treating, they're new at Halloween in general, Cuddle is going to be so nice for you to use as a trick-or-treat bag because it is, it's got that sensory soothing part that will be really, really nice. Let's see. Everything reset here in the middle. I think that's what we've got. Adriana, I'm going to try one more thing. We just have a few more minutes to talk. I don't want any echoes. Okay. Do we have echoes now? We still have echoes. We don't want echoes. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up. We can live with this. Okay, thank you, Jackie. I'm seeing some comments. These are really great. You can make it a little bit bigger for a kid's overnight bag. Exactly. So the instructions say 16 inches by 16 inches. That's just a guide. 20 inches, 25 inches, whatever side you want your tote to be is totally fine. This is just a place to get started. Like I said, when I did this one with the gory ghouls fabric, it's the same size. I just boxed the corners at the bottom and at the bottom, just wide at the bottom, which makes it shorter. Does that make sense? So there's no wrong answer. I'll show you how cute this tote is in other fabrics besides Halloween fabrics. So this is the Daisy Dukes digital cuddle print. And the inside, I use the Dalmatian cuddle print. How cute is this for a puppy dog lover. You can, of course, use this for Halloween, for trick-or-treating. The owl one is perfect for all fall long. On this one, I use the sunflower print as the lining. And then I put a sunflower applique on the front and did the whole thing in the Sparkle Cuddle. Sparkle Cuddle is my favorite because it looks way softer. I mean, it feels way softer than it looks. So it looks like it's going to be hard and metallic and super glittery, but it's not. It's just as soft as any of the other cuddles. So yes, these are perfect for sleepover bags. It's great for making a self-care gift for somebody. You could tuck it with other cuddle things that you've made. Maybe a care package for your student with a Team Spirit color scarf, or a gift for a teacher with a lap blanket and then some treats. I'm a big fan of giving treats or coffees or teas. A tote bag this size is perfect for gifts like that. So I think you'll find lots of uses for this tote bag project, whether you add embroidery or whether you just do it as a sewing project. I think you'll find a lot of fun ways to use it. So, Adriana, you have picked some winners for us, right? So we've got 3 today. We've got Melissa Tiff, Kathy Hibbler, and Cindy Shelley. So what we need you to do, our 3 winners, you'll send an email to info@shannonfabrics.com. Put your shipping information in there and your phone number so that the shipper can get that to you. You'll have a 2-yard cuddle, as well as information on getting $20 worth of embroidery designs from Designs by Baby Moon at the same time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We've had a lot of fun at Sew Together Live, and I hope that you'll join us again for the next time. Be sure to, if you're watching the replay, you can type in #replay so that we know that you've been watching with us. Please join us in the I Love Cuddle Fabric Facebook group. We're in there all the time sharing ideas. There's a lot of creative energy, lots of great projects, and lots of cuddle community love. So we'd love to have you in there with us in the Facebook group. All right, until next time, we'll see you later, and happy sewing.